You don't hit that button, there's no audio. I was like, "Hey, everybody." Yeah. Good morning. It's 9:30. I don't usually record this early, so I'm kinda out of my usual habit, but that's okay. We'll get this done. And the reason is that today I have 3 live streams. I have this one because I've said I'm gonna live stream one of my podcasts, like, every week. And then I'm interviewing with Jack Spirko over at the Survival Podcast at 12:30 Central. And then I'm going to end up doing Unloose the Goose. Usually this would be a week when I don't do Unloose the Goose, but we've had some pikers on the gaggle. And so I reached out to some other fellow agorists, and some agorists have reached out to me, and we're adding gaggle members basically, because the whole point of the Agorist podcast is to end up having, 2 times a month we talk about something freedom related or whatever, gardening, whatever's fun. And then we other 2 weeks of the month don't. Like that's how that podcast keeps going, because it takes more work than one would think to do a weekly podcast. Those of you listening to this who have podcasts, it actually takes a lot. That's the way it is. By the way, guys, on Odyssey, I can see your discussion, but it's only if I look to the right like this. And StreamYard, you're over there. If you have questions or comments along the way, just go ahead and throw them in. All caps makes it easier for me to see it. And do let people know that this is live. I kind of waited till the last minute to tell everybody on Telegram. Not sure who's going to join us today, but it is kind of fun to live record these things. Anyway, that's my day today. It's all the live streams all the time, and then of course roasting coffee, because it's coffee roasting season between now and, I mean, really mid-February is when it slows down. Like during that cold time, people buy more coffee, and then of course for the holidays. So that has definitely bumped up, and I had a little fun getting the roaster going. So is what it is. So today I'm going to live record the show, and it's about 4 things on the homestead that seem normal to me, that other people look at that and they're like, that's kind of an odd little weird quirky thing that she does. So I thought it'd be kind of fun. If you think of things you do that seem normal that people think are odd, go ahead and share them. I'll try to build it into the show. I am going to get started. What I'll do before I start is give sort of a long silence, so that when I get this audio file from StreamYard, I have a flat line that makes it a little easier to edit. Well, welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Wednesday, October 6th, 2021. This is episode 486 of Living Free in Tennessee. And I've been just doing a lot of homesteading stuff in the background as much as I can, and getting ready for a really busy fall of speaking engagements and travel and coffee roasting and all of that fun stuff. Tactical's been doing a lot of the work on the homestead this round, but also I've been out there and I've been thinking, there's some things I do that seem really normal to me that other people may not think are normal. So I'm going to just share 4 things that occurred to me that I do that I think are normal, and other people look at that and they're like, wow, she's an oddball. Why would she do, like, why would you even do that? Before I do that though, I want to mention a couple of things. One, the Freedom Cell Activation Tour. Derek Bros is traveling around the country, just getting people together in person, and it's coming to Kentucky on October 14th. I've put a link in the show notes if you want to know more about that. I wanted to promote this sooner, but I was having trouble getting all the details of the where, the when, and how in one place, and I'm still a little fuzzy on the details, so I just put the link to the event in the show notes, so you can go there. And I think they're updating the site as they get more information. I know that Tim has been promoting it over on social media, so I'm sure you can ask him specific questions. I'm not sure why it's so hard to find out where things are, because there's another one coming to Nashville, but I have no idea what time or what the venue is. Just keep your eye on that site, and you'll know. Hopefully you'll know by the time the event comes where it is, if you want to go to that. The other thing I wanted to point out is that turkey processing day is coming on November 20th. We are down to 10 turkeys. And if you'd like to take a class and learn how to process poultry, we'll show you on a turkey, which is a rather large piece of poultry, show you how to do, parts it out, spatchcock it, those sorts of things if you want to. You don't have to do that to yours. You go home with your turkey for Thanksgiving, and I'm going to talk to you about how to prepare a pasture-raised turkey, which is a little bit different than the butterball you get at the store. So that class is available, 125 for members, 150 for non-members. You do go home with your turkey. Or if you're like, screw the class, I just want the bird, let me know. There's you can apply on the form just to get a turkey. We're about 50-50 on who's in the class and coming home with a turkey and who's just getting a turkey. You'll need to pick those up at my farm, but School Bell Farm is also going to be there, and they're going to take them over to, like, they're in the sort of Columbia-ish area, and they're going to do drop-offs for people in their area as well. So if you want to get involved with that, it's at livingfreeintennessee.com. Finally, if you have a Stump the Sauce question or any other feedback you'd like to send me, you can do that. Just email it, Nicole@livingfreeintennessee.com, or go to livingfreeintennessee.com, click on contact, fill out the show notes. I mean, not the show notes, the form, the form, and those emails go straight to me. With that, it's time for our first segment and our only segment on a Wednesday show, Stump the Sauce. This is where you ask me questions about anything you want to ask me questions about. I got a good one from Joshua of Ganderflight. He wants to know how to prepare, how to be prepared for things, how to store food and all that other stuff if he is in a 28-foot RV with his family. The background is that his wife is retiring from her job, and they are going to take, I don't know how long, 6 months, a year, whatever they feel like taking, traveling around the country in an RV with their kids who are homeschooled, and getting really in tune with that simple life. And if you don't know who Joshua is, you know what? I'll drop a link in the show notes. He actually interviewed with me about a year ago about a project he's working on, and talked about how their long-term plan was to do this when she retires, which is to go do RV living. So that's the question. And his details are that his wife is retiring, and they want to know how to handle the basics of food, water, shelter, energy, security, and health and sanitation to best fit a mobile situation. And he's primarily concerned about, they got to put all their stuff on there. Where do they put the preps? What about weight? Because it's just a truck pulling a trailer, right? And I thought about this. It's kind of funny that he's asking me this question, since I do not live in an RV, but I have traveled around in an RV, and I lived out of a backpack for a little while in Europe, like when I was a teenager, like a lot of people used to do in the good old days when you could travel. And, you just go, you get a train pass for a while and just go wherever the train takes you. That was really a fun life event in my life back in my past. And the first thing that came to mind is that you're basically covering a lot of your needs already by having an RV and traveling around. So come at it from, how many functions can I get out of one thing in my RV to cover my needs of fuel, shelter, water, safety and sanitation, all of those things, right? Because if you don't do that, then you're going to end up with lots of extraneous stuff and way too much weight, and it's going to be a big mess. And when I think about how I prep here, I have lots of food stored in canning jars, and I have places to put this. And when I haven't had places to put things, that's been my line. Well, I guess that's what I can store. Or I've come up with creative ways to store things, like in pull-out drawers under the bed. I don't have that in place right now, by the way. I just have things under the bed that store that I don't access very often. But my long-term plan is to make a platform bed and have better storage, more organized storage under there. We do these things one thing at a time. So when you get an RV, first of all, you'll be surprised how many little cubby areas there are for storage and multiple functions that you get. And it really depends on what RV you get, how much you can store. But let's start with the overarching concept of multiple functions and the fact that you're essentially a turtle carrying your house around with you. When you're a turtle carrying your house around with you, guess what? Get a map out of where you're going. Look at your route, or if you're just going to go anywhere in the country, look at anywhere in the country and figure out where could I have a cache of things that would be necessary to sustain my family stored at a friend's, like a bin. You could have a bin of food and some extra clothing and whatever, cash if you think that's going to be important, ammunition if you think that's going to be important, stored at a friend's house. And the way you approach this is you look at the map, figure out where your friends are. And Josh, I know you have friends all over the country because you're in our network and you're in the TSP network. I know who this is, by the way, guys. Anyway, you call them, you say, hey, I would like to put a bin or two, and this is the size of the bin. It'll be all pre-packed. Can I put it there? And the reason I'm putting it there is I want to be able to access it in an emergency. And what that would look like is I would show up at your house and I'd get my bin and maybe be there for a little while and then move on my way to wherever I'm going to land. Because what you're preparing for is some level of security, if, like food security or stability when you're in an RV. You're looking for stability in case you get stuck somewhere or you have to leave somewhere quickly, right? And when I think about traveling with an RV, most of the time when stuff happens, you can bring your RV with you unless you're in Florida when a hurricane's going to hit and all of the roads are clogged. And then you find it easier to drop the trailer, jump in the truck, and use the truck. But if you're on foot at that point, like if you get into a situation where you have to be on foot, that's a whole different ballgame. But really, those are the three things that you're looking at. And, we could talk about New World Order and borders being shut down and all this other stuff, but I don't think you need to go there. I think if you prepare for what is likely to happen when you're on an RV trip, what you're going to find is most of the time you can bring your RV and then you're already prepped. Then you've got your shelter covered, right? So having stores of things that are consumable at friends' areas is really important. That's where I would do that. And honestly, guys, I hate that word. Why do I do that? Transparently, this is something I've been working on without the RV, is to have a bin placed strategically at different places with things that I would need that are mostly just restock items, food, maybe an extra pair of underwear, a couple of things like that, and some cash. And for me, I think cash is important just because if I can't access my bank account for some reason, because all the power is out in a region, which totally happened here 1 year ago, where no power, no access to your bank account, no way, no ability to pump gas, right? That I would have been able to say, okay, I'm using the cash I have to get to this point, and then I have a little bit of cash there to get to the next point, that sort of thing. So with that in mind, the other important thing is that GPS doesn't always work in an emergency. And that means you need to know how to get from where you are to where you need to go. So I would also buy a really good road atlas, and those are a little hard to find right now. I did this about a year ago, and have printed instructions or written instructions on how to get to those key oases, supply oases that you're putting together, and know, like, be able to route from here to there, right? And look at alternative routes besides the freeway system, because sometimes that gets all jacked up. You can still take back roads. So you want to have an atlas with enough detail to do that. What I've done for this reason, because I go on road trips, is when I go on a road trip, I know some places I can land. Like I just went to Kansas and back. I knew I could land at Eric's house and Patrick's house, and I knew where they were on the map before I went, so that I had some chance in heck of actually getting to the right place if for some reason my GPS stopped working. And to do that, I have a national road atlas with, different states on different pages. And I kind of circle the area where I can go to get, you have to have more detail than what's on the road atlas. And then I have state specific maps that have more road detail. And you can do maps or an atlas for your state. The states I travel most in are Tennessee and Texas. And so I have the actual book for Tennessee and for Texas, so that when I'm going somewhere, I can grab it, right? And what I've been working on over the last few years, Josh, is that I don't have to use my GPS all the time. Like I can get to Jack Spirko's house without GPS if I need to. And I think that skill is something that we're not teaching our kids as well as we should. So that is what I would do, is make sure I can get there. And then have your other documentation in order in case you need to access bank accounts and those sorts of things. Then the next thing I would think about as far as being prepared in an RV is money backups. Memorize your account numbers and the bank information. If you have that memorized, it doesn't matter what happens, you can get there. The same goes for cryptocurrency. If you're going to have cryptocurrency, have at least one place where you either memorize access to it to get to it, or you memorize how to restore your wallet. And that's usually as simple as remembering a 12-word key, which, for me, that's harder than it sounds, but you can do it. You can do it. You can find a way to do it. And make sure that your wife or somebody else can also memorize those things. I think with those in place, you have a pretty good foundation. And then it's just looking at what you put in the RV, right? As far as what will get me the 500 to 1,000 miles. I mean, I would try to be 800 miles or less from wherever I need to go to resupply, and maybe less than that, maybe 500. And with that, you think about, okay, I can do 2 extra gas cans. If you get jerry cans, you can do 2 extra of those in the back of your truck that are just there all the time and they're full, and that's 10 gallons. How far does that get you? And then keep your tank above half a tank when you're traveling, which I know means more stops, but if you're worried about it, that's what you do. And how far will that get you? That's how much you need to store if you want to have gas, and that gas equals mobility and the ability to get to those places where you've put bins of resupply, right? And often those places are places where you can stop and regroup in an emergency. Then, of course, battery backup packs to keep your phone charged and other devices that you may want to have access to along the way. I really like the Anchor bricks. Those are great. And you can set up a whole charging system inside your truck to keep them topped off, and you're good to go. That's how I would handle fuel. I wouldn't get overly complicated on any of this. For security, I would say the most important thing for you is situational awareness. That means when you're going somewhere, have an idea of what the pressures are in the area, what's likely to happen, what the weather forecast is. If a blizzard is coming to Michigan and you're heading to Michigan, maybe you turn around in your RV and don't go to Michigan. Or if you're in Michigan, maybe you head south. You know, you just got to keep an eye on what's happening. Look carefully at gun laws. So if you're going to bring a firearm, and you're not permitted in a state with reciprocity, then you're screwed. And some states don't bode well for you. And those states are like New York and Illinois are pretty bad. I don't know about California, but I would definitely look at what's required. Every time I go on a trip and I know I'm going through 3 or 4 states, I look at the gun laws so I know, okay, in this state, the clip has to be separate from the gun, right? That's Missouri. And in this state, they have constitutional carry. Well, does that apply to me or only citizens of that state? So you need to look at all of those things. If you're permitted, which I am not, then it's going to be a different set of things that you need to do, but it's important to do that. And then, of course, don't do stupid things with stupid people in stupid places. If there's a riot going on in St. Louis, don't go there. If you hear there might be a protest or riot in St. Louis, don't go there, right? I think that alone helps you with security. And then the last thing I would do if I was going to be on the road is have some of these sort of, straight talk or red pocket or these sort of one-off burner phones that you can get for free or cheap. And you either pay a monthly amount or you just get it. And when you activate it, it starts your monthly thing. And what that will do is, if your Verizon phone doesn't work, have an AT&T one if Verizon's your primary, or have T-Mobile. And that gives you just an extra way to communicate with people. Or if you're in an altercation and your cell phone gets stolen from you, you have something they may not have gotten as a backup so that you can communicate with people. And I'm getting a comment from the live stream on YouTube, because guys, we're live streaming the episode if you did not know that. And Naked Toes Quilting, nice. Naked Toes Quilting says, for road atlases, go to a truck stop, buy a laminated spiral bound trucker's atlas. That's exactly what I got on Amazon. And it shows truck routes which avoid low clearance bridges, which is nice in an RV. Yeah, that's absolutely a great tip for RV preparedness. So that's security. From a food standpoint, weight more than space is your issue, right? All of my canned jars are are a problem for you. You may want to bring some pickles or something, but think about what your family needs for a week to eat. I know I can pack for a week in about a, 18 by 12-inch cube, and I'm ketogenic. And the way I do that is a combination of, pre-cooked bacon, deviled eggs or eggs, other meats, and then freeze-dried foods. So I have made ketogenically friendly beef stew, and then freeze dried it, and it shrinks in volume a little bit, but it really shrinks in weight, and that's awesome. Same with freeze dried milk and eggs. So if you want to have about a week's worth of food, or however many days you think it would take you to get from point A to point B, and it doesn't have to be a lot of variety, get some freeze dried food, whether you buy some commercial stuff or you find somebody like me who has a Harvest Right freeze dryer and can make you some really cool stuff. That will give it'll just nail your food preparedness, and you may find yourself using it, right? I make bone broth and I freeze dry that, and it's way better than most of the powdered foods that you can get at the store. And really, it's nourishment, right? It's calories and hydration that you need. And the cool thing about freeze dried food is if you end up in a situation where it's just like the hurricane's coming and the best thing for us to do is put a hiker's backpack on dad's back and go, then that doesn't weigh very much. And everybody can take, if everybody has a backpack, they can take something. And again, your goal at that position, if something that bad happens and you got to abandon ship with your RV, then your goal is to get somewhere where you can regroup. And that goes back to having stuff like little resupply things ready to go. But freeze dried foods are great for RV storage. And I mean, I'm finding a whole new universe of freeze dried foods as I've gotten into freeze drying it at home. I get some better quality out of some things. I don't get better quality out of everything, but you'd be surprised how much you can fit weight wise and space wise in a very small space with the freeze dried food. And then everything else, it's already in your RV. So if you think of things from a kit standpoint, health and sanitation or whatever else, you have a little box that has all your basic things like Band-Aids and whatever for cuts and sores. You have a kit for your vitamins. You have a kit for your toiletry items. If you think about packaging these things as kits and you need to do something quickly, like you got to drop the RV and load the truck because there's a hurricane coming in Florida and you got to get north, and it's way easier to do that without dragging your trailer, then you can quickly go through the RV and say, okay, everybody grab their toiletry bag and put it in a bin. And we're going to have these first aid items, and we're going to grab the freeze dried food. We're going to grab some extra blankets. We have a water filter. By the way, a hiker's water filter will get you through a lot of situations if you're somewhere where there's water. And you can get storage containers for water that shrink down when they're not full and fill them if you're going to need to store water. Anyway, so you can get those kits and throw them quickly in the truck and then go, because the back of the truck has a lot of space for storage. And really, from a preparedness standpoint, anytime you need to do something that drastic, you don't need a lot. You need about 3 days of stuff probably that'll get you from point A to point B, and then you regroup. But if you keep things tidy in the RV and in kits, then you can really get going as quickly as possible. And, I pack for things all the time. And I get packed really quickly. Like I can usually pack in an hour or less for a week-long trip, unless for some reason I didn't do my laundry. But basically, what takes me the longest in packing is thinking about what I want to take, doing the laundry if my clothes are not done, and everything else I already have in kits. I already have my travel toiletries in a bag by itself, ready to go. And that's here at my house. If I was in an RV situation, I would just have that with me in the RV, and it's serving both purposes. In my house, I have a different toothbrush and different toothpaste and all of that in the cabinet. And I have other sanitary and first aid things ready to go. So I can pretty much get packed up really quickly, even when I have a big event I'm going to where I need to do coffee and other things. The thing that takes me the longest to pack for an event is roasting and bagging the coffee and putting it in the boxes, right? It's not the booth, the banner, all of that other stuff I bring, because that's already packed and ready to go. Just bring that concept into your RV. Anyway, that was a way longer segment than I thought it would be. I'm going to answer this for Jack's show too in a much shorter format. And I do have one more piece of feedback from people listening to that. Eric Meyer said, food for movement should be extremely dense, quick to eat, and optimally be eaten only once a day on the move. Okay, so he went full military on your butt, and he's not concerned about your children. And if it's that extreme, sure. But if it's really just a matter of having about a week's of food worth of food so you can get from point A to point B, I think you can do that and not have terrible food the whole time. Eric, I'm sure that's terrible food. Anyway, we've now got barky dogs. With that, it's time for the main topic of today's show, and that is 4 normal things on the homestead that seem odd to other people. I'm leaving a really long blank thing here, guys, on the live stream because I have to edit this crap. Hey, knock it off. Cece, leave it. Okay, so here we go. Nicole's letting her dog out. Would have been nice if we didn't have people inciting barking. Jeez. My dogs have been so very barky this week. I don't know what it is. Like, they're just like, rah, 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 rah. And God. Anyway, I'm calm again now. That won't be in the podcast. So that's just exclusive to the live stream. You guys got to see me have a meltdown. It's not really a meltdown, but okay, I'm going to leave a silence again. I'm going to jump back in. I'm going to reintroduce the main topic of today's show, and then we're going to go from there. With that, it's time for the main topic of today's show, 4 normal things on the homestead that seem odd to other people. I got to thinking about this because, yeah. So at a Holler neighbor dinner, one of Jenny's boys asked me, "Where's the bone bag?" And I was like, it's, make one because the other bone bag's full. And I realized, like, most people from outside the Holler wouldn't know what in the world that means. So I thought, there are some things that we do because our goal is to use everything that we can here, one of our homesteading goals. And the bone bag is something I do that seems normal to me that other people think is weird. And some people even think it's gross. And so I thought, well, why don't I share some of these things that we do that are a little quirkier than other things? And the first one is the bone bag. We try to use up everything. And that means we're getting whole animals. Whole animals have bones. If you like roast a chicken or something and then you eat the chicken and then the bones are left, you can put those in broth with onions and spices and whatever you want. Broccoli ends, anything, vegetable matter. And you can slow cook that or pressure cook that and you end up with bone broth. Thus, the introduction of the bone bag. And so when we have anything with bones in it, which is most of the meats we eat have a bone here, unless it's ground meat, because when I butcher it, I usually go along joints for roasts, and I rarely slice through bones. Occasionally I will if I want a specific cut, but stuff has bones in it. I don't take the chicken off the chicken and then cook the boneless chicken. That's very rare that would happen. It's way easier and more efficient, and I use up more of the meat if I cook things on the bone. So we'll have dinner, and then people will eat their dinner, and they will have bones left. And we take the bones and we put them in a bag. These are bones that people had their mouth on, right? And we will put them in the freezer. And when I have enough of those, I boil the crap out of them and make bone broth. And some people think that's really gross because people had their mouths on the bones, and it's different people, right? And they can't get over that. And my opinion is I've boiled the crap out of these. And so from a sanitation standpoint, it's fine. Most of the bones we get, by the way, are not bones that have been gnawed on, but it could be that it was on somebody's plate at one point. So that's something that seems really normal to me that some of my hyper germophobic friends think is really odd. And that's the first one. And guys on the live stream, if you have like funny things you do, let me know because I'll be happy to share your odd things with everybody too. Second thing, homesteaders are completely immune. We have no filter over what is appropriate to discuss over a meal. So if you get a group of homesteaders together and we have dinner, for example, it is not unusual that we will be discussing methods of slaughter while we eat. And this is something that when I have outsiders, I'm calling them outsiders, non-homesteaders to the Holler, and they have a meal, we'll start down the road of talking about slaughter. And I'll be like, oh, guys, remember we have non-homesteaders here. Maybe we should change the topic. Because we'll discuss like how to exactly cut the neck of a chicken to slaughter it, or how we're going to hang up the cow or the pig, or scalding, or what to do when this happens. What if you puncture the pancreas? Like all of these things that come up um, during so somebody on the live stream saying, yep, we talk about poop. Yeah, we talk about poop. We talk about all sorts of things that are not appropriate for polite society while we're eating dinner. And it's because we're interested in learning. What we're doing when we do that is we're just, one person maybe follows muscle lines and muscle sets to do butchering. Another person butchers a different way. And we'll talk about how that works. Or somebody field dresses their deer up in the mountains and then brings them down because they weigh less if you take their guts out. Others bring them down intact and hang them up and do that. Janet says, I accidentally brought up chicken butchering at a vegetarian restaurant once. Ha ha ha, that's funny. Boar taint. Yeah, boar taint's another one. Like, we'll talk about all these things. You'll be eating the meat and I'll be like, there's boar taint in this. I can tell, right? Boar taint is if you don't neuter the male boar, sometimes there's a flavor that comes through that most of the world cannot taste, but I can taste it. So then I'll be eating and be like, this has boar taint in it. And I can make myself eat that, guys, but it doesn't taste very good to me. So I'm particularly susceptible to that. That's why I was so keen on getting our pigs neutered at a very young age, so there's no chance of boar taint when we process them. And I've got boar taint coming out of the live stream. So that's the second thing that seems perfectly normal to me to talk about how to process food. And sometimes the food is canning green beans, and sometimes it's how to properly parts out a rabbit, which is something I'm still not sure I know how to do right. I just sort of cut it up and ate it. That's the funny thing about butcher, right? Is even if you do it quote unquote wrong, you still end up with meat. And unless you did something like puncture the pancreas, you're going to be fine, even if you didn't do the right quote unquote cuts that are acceptable in the butchery world. It's meat. Meat is hard to screw up. It's just that your steak is the wrong. If you go triangle steaks, they're actually pretty hard to cut. I got, one time from a USDA certified butcher in Tennessee, which there aren't very many, so you can figure this out, very far from my house, so not underground. I got steaks in a cow that were all like triangular, so thin on one side and thick on the other. Oh, that whole cow, it was really hard to cook steak because it was like overdone and underdone, or done right and way overdone. And I never went. It was like whoever cut that cow up was drunk that day. I don't know. I never went back to that butcher. They also are notorious for this. Go to pick up the cow and they're like, oh yeah. 2 days later, we found another bag that we forgot to give you that was somewhere else. And it's like, okay, now I got to drive 3 hours to go get that and 3 hours back. It's a pain in my butt. And do they ever compensate you for this or give you a discount? No. They don't need to. They're USDA certified. It's hard to find a USDA certified butcher. That's why I don't care about that anymore. I get way better quality from the non-USDA shops, just for the record. Thank you, USDA, for screwing up the meat system. That's my rant for the day about meat. Third thing, it's called the leftover rollover. Rolling leftovers are not only a thing, we do this with pride as a homesteader, and we find as many ways to roll as we can. Now, what do I mean by the rolling leftovers? I talk about it in my book, Cook With What You Have, where at the beginning of the week, you roast a chicken and you have the roast chicken. And then the next day, you have taken the meat off the bones and you've boiled the bones and you have chicken dumpling stew. And then you still had some chicken left, maybe because you don't actually eat. But, or maybe you cooked 2 chickens. I don't know. The next day, you make like a chicken salad sandwiches. That's what I call rolling leftovers. Or you had a little bit of the chicken dumpling stew left and you had beef stew and you mix those together, making holler stew. There are lots of ways to roll leftovers. And I know a lot of people struggle with getting their kids and their families to eat leftovers, a thing I do not understand. Because often food is better the second day from the first day. Lasagna is this way, spaghetti is this way, beef stew is this way, any curry I've ever made is this way, chicken soup is this way. Like all of these things that you make are almost always better the second day. The only thing I wouldn't do is I cook the steak and then I recook the steak. That wouldn't be as good, but I wouldn't do that because that would be stupid, right? Anyway, rolling leftovers is part of life because again, back to point 1, our goal is to use up everything, and that means not throwing our leftovers away when we can eat that. It's nourishment. Chili, exactly, chicken chili, you can do all sorts of things. And it's with a matter of pride that we we share with each other ideas of ways that we've used things, right? I just told you some chicken ideas, but there are probably 200,000 other chicken ideas. You can take the roasted chicken and bread it and fry it and have sort of like a fried chicken experience, even though it was already cooked. There's all sorts of stuff that you can do. Something I like to do if I have like a steak and I only ate 3/4 of my steak is slice it up and put it in the fridge in a Tupperware. And the next morning when I get up, I saute up some onions. By morning, I mean brunch because I'm now intermittently fasting. So I eat after 12. But I'll saute that up with some onions. I'll pour eggs over it and I'll have like a steak and egg scramble. Maybe a little bit of cheese, maybe a little basil, maybe a little bit of spinach, like something really good. You can do that, or you can make crepes, or you can do all sorts of stuff with leftovers. And the thing about this is, at the core of this, from the homesteader perspective, I almost always prefer the food made here over what I can buy in any restaurant. It's very rare I find a restaurant that's better than what we're cooking here. And the reason for that isn't skill of cooking, it's quality of ingredients, right? I told you the story earlier this week, I think, that last week we had steak twice. One was from the cow I get every year, and one was a high-end organic grass-fed cow steak from Publix. And that second one did not taste as good as the first one. I cooked them the exact same way. The meat quality isn't as good. Leftover steak is great on salad or in a steak and mushroom pie. Yum. Absolutely true. So I think the reason homestead meals are often better than restaurant meals is the quality of our ingredients. It's as fresh as it can be if it's come off your land or from a farm next door. We've raised our animals with intention of keeping all the crap out of it. We haven't gone into a large commercialized feeding system. And even those grass-fed animals may have spent time in a CAFO, guys. If you start digging into the grass-fed, organic, commercialized movement, you discover that those steaks that you thought were raised and finished on pasture weren't necessarily. We have examples of people coming into Tennessee, buying cattle at auction and calling it pasture-raised, grass-fed organic. Yeah. And then they move them to their farms and process them. And those were just raised however anybody raised them. And a lot of people raise their cattle on grain if they're finished their cattle on grain. I have to work with the farmer directly to not do that because he does that with his other cattle. And we don't want that. We want cattle that ate grass, not cattle that ate corn, right? So anyway, homemade is usually preferred over restaurant food. And people think that's odd because they're like, don't you want to go out and have fun? I'm like, yeah, I do like to go out to restaurants, rarely, because usually I end up with a tummy ache because they're buying their food from whatever that commercial food is that starts with a W. I can't even remember the name, but it's just not that good. And the quality is not that good. And the restaurants that do farm to table, they're pretty good, but you're going to pay for that, right? So you might as well just take your stuff that you get from your homestead or from neighboring farms and cook it, and then it's just as good. And it takes just as long. That's the funny part. It doesn't really save me time to go out to eat. I have one person on the live feed, Eric, saying, "Gross item: the compost deposit bin under the sink. Anything non-meat deposited looks scary if it hasn't gone out in a while." Yeah, key to not having fruit fly problems is take the compost out every night before you go to bed, by the way. But many homesteaders, again, in that effort to support item number 1, which is try to use up everything, we will put our scraps into a big old bucket and either turn them into compost or feed them to the animals. I don't have to go non-meat in mine because I have pigs and I have poultry and they will eat meat. So you can put your meat scraps in there. The bones are a different issue. You can do that with your livestock, but if I have bones around my yards, my dogs are going to eat them. If they're cooked bones, there's that risk of hurting the dog with it. So I'm usually careful to keep my bones separate and put it in my digester outside, which turns them into compost over time. But yeah, your compost bin can get really gross, especially if you keep it under your kitchen sink and forget that it's there. That's something that I have done, and I'm not even going to describe what happens when that happens. So my 4th item of things that happen on the homestead that other people think are odd. Doesn't happen all the time, doesn't happen to everybody, but usually happens to everybody who has a homestead at least one time until they figure out a way around it. Baby livestock ends up in the house. Yep. Now, I've seen it when hurricanes are coming in that people bring their adult livestock into their house, like horses and stuff, to protect them from the wind. So that's a thing. But if you are raising livestock, this could mean pigs, chickens, rabbits, goats. It could be just about anything. And a baby is born and it's super cold outside, and that baby is going to die if you leave it out in the barn and you don't have a good way to heat your barn. Guess what? Guess what? You end up with said animal in your house somehow. It may be that you make a little pen for it with protection for your floor, because when you bring baby livestock in your house, you're bringing poop into your house. That's what you're doing. Uh, but a lot of people end up needing to bottle feed pigs. I one time decided that I was going to incubate chicken eggs. And because when the incubator I had, it needs a stable temperature around it to hold a stable temperature in it, I put that in my living room and it was fine until the last week. Once they started hatching, it just smelled like chickens hatching, which is not a good smell. I ended up with baby chicks in my living room, right? It's just a thing that happens. Baby goats born during a Michigan blizzard. You end up with 2 sets of twins in your living room. This is why, if you're a homesteader, you should totally keep a crate around. It is a really odd thing that we do, but we do it because we want to be good stewards of the animals. And just leaving them outside, like in that blizzard in Michigan, it's not an option. Like, you can do that, they will die. Your job is to keep them from dying. And sometimes just keeping them a little warm for a little amount of time or bottle feeding them gets you over the hump. I have a friend who brings, every time she chooses a boar that she wants to have as an ongoing boar that inseminates the female pigs, she'll bring it inside and like treat it like a pet, so that when it is 800 or 900 pounds later in its life, it's very gentle, right? You want that in a boar, because what you don't want is an asshole boar that's going to hurt you, because 800 pounds coming at you, not fun and kind of scary, actually. So there are lots of reasons livestock end up inside, but I've actually had it once. I left my doors open and I was canning tomatoes, just like I think Janet's canning tomatoes today. And I'm canning tomatoes. I'm listening to a podcast, and all of a sudden I hear and right behind me, the rooster walked into my house because the door was open for a cross breeze, because I was trying to cool it down because I was canning. And he walked up and crowed at me. And I'm like, well, that's the first time I've had an adult chicken in my house. And then it's like, get out before you poop, because chickens just poop anywhere, right? But yeah, so livestock in the house. Those are my 4 odd things that I have found as a homesteader that aren't odd to me, that seem odd to others. And I'm seeing in the live feed and the comments on Odyssey and YouTube that it's apparently happened to other people too. What odd things do you have? Email me. I'd be happy to read them out on the online. If you hear this and you're like, oh yeah, there was this one time that X happened. Tell me what X is. I think it'd be fun to share stories about things that seem normal to us that are not normal to other people. With that, if you like the show and the work I do, you can support me in 2 ways. 1, get your coffee over at hollow-roast.com. 2, become a member. To become a member, just go to livingfreeintennessee.com, click on membership, and sign up. With that, guys, go out, make it a great week. I'm really disappointed that I'm going to have to edit out the dog barking in the middle of that episode. You know why? Because I have 3 live streams today. I don't have time to edit my show, but I guess I'm making time to edit my show. Anyway, guys, thanks for joining the live stream. We'll be doing this about once a week until I can't do it once a week. Usually closer to Christmas, it gets super busy. And then who knows what time of day I'm even recording these things at that point, because I try to make that mail deadline. Mailing is going to change at Hollow Roast. We now have access to UPS. I mailed something UPS yesterday. Mail. Sent it. Anyway, I shipped it UPS because it was going to be faster. With the USPS slowing down, I may be bringing UPS in because it may be more stable. I'll keep an eye on it. They're purposefully making the United States Postal Service suck. So I guess I need to look into that. Anyway, thanks for joining the live stream. And I will see you guys on the other side. Like 12:30, Jack Spirko on his channel. Make it a great week.